Besides the M5, Minister, I hope you won't be letting us down on Metro North. In a few weeks' time, the whole north side is counting on you to ensure this project is delivered. Look, road traffic legislation is clearly very complex. However, there seems to have been an endless process of tidying up legislation, as you yourself noted, Minister, in the aftermath of last year's supposedly landmark Road Traffic 2010 bill, which introduced the primary legislative changes for mandatory testing and the lowering of the drink-drive limit. It's simply incredible, though, that this is the second amending legislative bill that has been necessary to address the profound flaws in former Transport Minister Dempsey's 2010 Act. In effect, two absolutely critical aspects of the 2010 Act, the lower drink-drive limit and mandatory testing, couldn't be introduced without this extra legislation. The earlier 2011 amending Act we dealt with a few months ago dealt primarily with aspects of the mandatory testing regime itself, and the number 2 bill before us today relates to some of the drink driving provisions. But it's truly astonishing to learn from the Minister's very helpful note that there'll still have to be a further road traffic number 3 bill that's intended to cover, among other things, another amendment of the 2010 Act in relation to impairment testing and unconscious drivers. And even, you know, I can't understand, like, why is that not here today, Minister? Or why didn't you deal with the graduated driver licensing system that we've been talking about for years in either this bill or the last bill? The short number 2 bill before us, sets out a series of amendments to sections 2 to 9 that clarify and tighten road safety measures, and sections 7 and 8, of course, relate to the obligation of drivers to provide a preliminary breath specimen and a blood or urine specimen in hospital. Colleagues from the last Dáil will remember the legislative agonies that we went through in relation to the 2010 Road Traffic Act, and I can remember Minister Dempsey sending various irate Fianna Fáil deputies to meet me about this that particular act. And the genuine concerns, of course, that were raised by those rural deputies on the impact of the lower drink driving limit, especially on senior citizens who may live in very isolated parts of the country. I remain deeply, obviously, concerned at the problems faced by rural citizens, and that's why I hope again in the Comprehensive Spending Review, Minister, you will again ensure that our impressive rural transport network will not lose any funding, and that Bus Éireann will not lose any funding. So that's additional responsibilities you now have in the next few weeks. However, the international evidence, that was available. Well, I'm talking to you now today. Rarely I get a chance to talk to you. You're the Minister for Transport. However, the international evidence that was available on best practice on the drink driving limit was simply overwhelming in support of the reduced 50 milligram limit. This, of course, included a 2002 research, which you quote, that found the chance of being involved in a collision was 18% higher for drivers with a 0.04 grams per decilitre than for a driver who had no drink taken. There was a 38% higher risk at 0.05, a 63% higher at 0.06, and 109% higher for a driver with a 0.07. And I note, in fact, again in your helpful briefing notes, Minister, the list of countries, distinguished countries, I suppose you could say, like Norway, Sweden, Spain, Romania, Portugal, Latvia, Hungary, Greece, Cyprus, Czech Republic, which even have a lower limit, a lower basic limit than we are now finalising today. Unfortunately, Minister Dempsey, he moved to reduce the drink driving limit without having ensured that the evidential breath testing equipment had been recalibrated to facilitate the new lower limit. And this has meant that it's only now the lower limit can come into force. But can you, Minister, now confirm that the new 50 milligram limit per 100 millilitres will apply from the October bank holiday? So will we be testing for that in a few weeks' time? I understand the new machines are currently being tested by the Medical Bureau of Road Safety, but has the Garda training programme finished? I think I asked you a question about that a while ago, and how many new machines have been purchased and are being tested. There have been some suggestions that the MBRS won't have enough breathalyzers in place to facilitate a lower drink driving limit from the October bank holiday. And can you say what the cost was, Minister, maybe in your reply? Ms Susan Gray and her park promoting awareness, responsibility and care in our roads colleagues, they've consistently complained that when a breathalyzer is sent for analysis to the Medical Bureau of Road Safety in relation to a particular case, the machine is out of action for weeks on end, and out of 1,000 or so breathalyzers currently in use, there's never anything like that number actually available to An Garda Síochána at any one time. And Park have also long campaigned against the practice of having the standard deviation, deduction of around 70.5% from the actual recorded breath alcohol reading, which was also, I think, Minister, starkly highlighted in the recent RTE programme Traffic Blues. And those road safety campaigners contend that the 70.5% inbuilt deduction means that the evidential reading used in court could be 20 to 25% lower than the actual BAC at the time of testing. I just wonder, are you going to address address this in either the number 3 bill or maybe in your response. And I think we all agree with the previous speaker, and you are now well aware of the Trojan work carried out by the Inishowen-based National Road Safety Group Park, led by Ms Susan Gray, Ms Donna Price and Ms Anne Fogarty. And I'd like to again pay tribute, Cathaoirleach, to these outstanding women, especially in relation to their work with yourself and the last Transport Ministers and those of us who were on the Transport Committees of the last and the present Dáil. Section 7 and 8 of the bill before us deals with the aspects of the provision of preliminary breath specimen by a driver and subsequent obligations on the provision of a urine or blood sample in a hospital by a driver who's been involved in a serious collision. The Park organisation remain particularly concerned about this issue, given the research they cite by HSE Public Health Medicine Specialist Dr Declan Bedford that only 8% of surviving drivers involved in fatal road crashes in Ireland are tested for alcohol. And as Susan, Donna, Anne and their colleagues note, and I quote, that our loved ones, of course, who died, were tested under coroner's law at autopsy. However, in 9 out of 10 cases, the surviving driver, who may well have caused their death or catastrophic life-altering injury, avoided testing. And they say the legislation let our families down. Now, I understand they have sent you a briefing document and sent it to the current Transport Committee relating to the system in Northern Ireland, which seems to close any potential loophole to do with consent and the surviving driver, especially if they're in a fragile medical condition. I'm informed, for example, that the Police Service of Northern Ireland can retain specimens of blood taken from an unconscious driver until that person has regained consciousness. The driver is then asked to consent to the analysis of the specimen. If they refuse, it's an offence. And I note that the Irish Times says today that this loophole cannot be closed in the bill before us, or cannot be closed because we do need primary legislation. And I presume you're going to address that in the number 3 bill. Again, why didn't you just do it here today? I also hope that the Minister will examine, I know by the way that Northern Ireland has had this system since 2002 for 9 years. I hope you'll also examine some of the ongoing problems in drug driving on our roads, and we discussed that before. I think about some of the systems that the Australians have, and why can't we have them? Viewers of the Traffic Blues programme, that excellent programme on RT, will be vividly aware of the problems that Gardaí can face in accessing intoxilizer machines, Cathaoirleach. If a motorist fails a roadside breath test here, the Gardaí then must find a station that has a working intoxilizer machine to get a definitive reading on the motorist's blood alcohol limit. And we saw in the programme how the Gardaí were left traipsing around from one station to another trying to get their hands on the machine. I understand in the UK they have these mobile intoxilizers to breathalyse motorists who are suspected of being over the limit as soon as they're pulled over. So as a result of today's legislation, are we looking at now a system of mobile intoxilizers which would greatly facilitate the work of the Traffic Corps? So I warmly welcome this bill, Cathaoirleach, and any further legislative measures that will enhance road safety. I'd also like to once again commend the Director of the Road Safety Authority for his outstanding leadership, Mr Noel Brett, and also Chairperson Mr Gay Byrne. Indeed, we have made major advances over the past decade, with a 48% drop in road fatalities particularly between 2008 and 2010. But 142 people, I think, up to today, Minister, were tragically killed. 142 tragic, awful circumstances, too many. I note, by the way, as well, in the recent, and you're probably interested in this from your own profession, that in a recent research by Dr Sheridan and his colleagues at the Department of Public Health, HSE Dublin North East, that serious injuries on the roads are significantly underestimated in the RSA figures. The Sheridan research, for example, says there are actually 5 times the number of serious injuries caused by road accidents, roads collisions, at nearly 15,000, 14,861, rather than the 4,263 recorded, I think, in the last RSA statistics. And astonishingly, the Sheridan study indicates that this is still probably an underestimate, as data from A&E, GPs and private hospitals are not included. I remember discussing with with Fine Gael spokesperson in the last Dáil whether or not we should whether or not we should look at something like, say, the Marine Casualty Investigation Board, which is an organisation I admire in relation to accidents and deaths at sea, and whether or not every single traffic accident or traffic collision should have that type of report. And I'd just like to ask you, as a start, maybe you should look at the reformation of the CT 68 form used by Gardaí, which again, I made that case to you, I think, before, by comparison with the Northern Ireland, with the PSNI's document of investigation seems to be a much more complicated and less informative document. As I said, the 142 deaths so far is 142 tragedies too many. And across the EU, of course, the figure is mind-blowing. I mean, last year, 35,000 people died in road accidents, each year in road collisions, which is, it's a catastrophe. And 2 points I just want to ask you about that, if you would consider. I asked in conclusion, I asked Minister Dempsey when he was both Minister for the Environment, and Minister for Transport, whether or not he'd look at car technology and look to the major car companies. For example, why don't all cars have alcohol locks, which will allow drivers to know that they're over the limit? Why don't all cars have potential speed limiters, so when younger people from Donegal or Dublin North East are using cars, that they could actually be limited? The technology is there. Why isn't it done? So in conclusion, I warmly welcome the bill, and I hope it will begin to move towards a situation where drink driving is regarded as totally shameful and utterly socially unacceptable, and it will be something that will become a very rare and serious, of course, criminal event. Thanks, Cahirlock.